Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a guide for round 1 of the GR Supra GT Cup. Let's get this started. Your first braking point is this path on the left that is before the 200 meter mark. You have to start to brake pretty early as it takes a long time for the car to slow down to the desired speed. Once you're about to turn in, slowly ease off on the brakes and be very patient with your throttle output as this car does have a bit of an oversteery nature. Just as you approach the 100 meter mark, you want to brake hard for a short moment, slowly ease off on the brakes as you turn in. Try to hit the apex and carefully start to accelerate. Then start to ease off on the throttle as you approach this path that is on the right. Once you start to pass that path, you want to make sure that you're off the throttle for a short moment. Do lots of throttle control. Try to stick as far to the right as you can and start to brake before you reach this little orange mark that is before the 50 meter sign. Brake hard for a moment, then ease off on the brakes to try to get the car to rotate. Try to be on 4th gear when you start to accelerate so you can get a bit more stability. Just like the first turn, you have to brake pretty early for this turn as well. So you'll be braking well before you reach the Dunlop sign that goes over the track. Brake hard for a while, slowly ease off on the brakes, take advantage of the curbs. Ease off the throttle for this turn, then try to straighten out the car before you start to fully accelerate. Brake before you reach the thin white line on the left. You won't be braking for that long. You just want to try to get the car to rotate as fast as possible, then slowly start to accelerate, then start to brake when the curb on the left ends. Adjust your braking so you can try to hit this apex and carefully start to accelerate. Then you have to brake pretty early for this turn, and in this case I go pretty wide just to try to set myself up for the exit. Go on to 4th gear so you can get a bit more stability. And you just want to try to make sure that you can exit the turn in as straight of a line as possible so the car won't do anything silly. But that is all for the lap guide. Let's go ahead and talk about the strategies. For the qualifying session, you have 5 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time. So the fuel multiplier is turned off so you don't have to do any fuel burning, thank goodness. But with the tire multiplier at times 12, you do want to be a bit careful as you go through this outlap. So what you basically want to do is just take it easy through the corners. Whenever you're going in a straight line, you can start to fully accelerate. But when you're starting to approach a corner, you want to start to slow down a little bit early, and you don't want to use all of your braking power. And once again, you just want to take things pretty easy for this outlap. By the time that you're about to start your qualifying lap, your tires should be already warmed up and they should be good to go. But at the same time, you just want to make sure that you don't have any of that nasty tire wear already going on. So as you exit the second to last corner, that is when you want to start to speed things up and pretty much just get yourself set up for the final corner, and then you can start going about your flying laps. And don't forget that slipstream was adjusted, so it's not as big of a deal as it was in the last update, but it's still pretty nice to come across if you happen to have someone in front of you. Just make sure that you have enough space between yourself and those around you so you don't end up bumping around with them and end up ruining yours and their qualifying times. For this race, you do have a grid start with a false start check. So what you want to do is start on 2nd gear and bring the traction control up to 1. That way when the lights go green, you can get a pretty good launch out of the starting line. So for the race itself and the Supras, oh boy. So if you thought that the N300 Supra from last year's Super Cup was a handful, this year's Supras with the N400 BOP, they're even more of a handful. And that applies to both the 2019 and the 2020 Supra, which is the car that I'll be using for this race. These cars kind of have a mind of their own. They either want to understeer a little bit or they want to oversteer and try to bite your head off. They're pretty crazy cars to deal with. But anyways, so unlike last year's Super Cup, thankfully for this race, you do not have to do any stupid fuel saving at all. You can basically rev to your heart's content without having to worry about running out of fuel. However, there is a little bit of a problem, and that is with the tire wear. So the tire wear is at times 12. You're on sports hard tires, but either way, the tire wear is going to become a bit of a problem, especially on the latter half of the race. Starting at around lap 5, you'll most likely start to feel the effects of the tire wear, so you want to start to think about braking a little bit earlier, especially for the first turn and the hairpin that's at the very start of the third sector. But because of the tire wear, you're actually going to want to try to tire save as much as you can. If you tire save throughout this race, it is possible to completely avoid using the pit stop for a tire change, as the time difference from your second lap to your final lap isn't going to be big enough to even justify having to go to the pit stop. And that's if you're pretty consistent with your times. And well, that's the thing, it's going to be a little bit hard to try to get really consistent times just because of this car's weird nature and the tire wear affecting the car throughout the race. So if you're able to get the consistency down, then you're already in a good spot. So how do you save your tire life? So to tire save or to save your tire life, you want to make sure that you're not steering too much, as that will basically be scrubbing your tires. In that turn that we just went through, that's a definite tire killer. So you want to try to slow it down just a little bit if you notice that you're scrubbing your tires too much. So how do you notice if you're potentially scrubbing your tires too much? Take a look at the bottom of the screen. So just over that little bar, there's a red dot, and you basically want to make sure that the dot doesn't go all the way to one side or the other. Of course, there's an exception, and that's if you're going through really tight turns and you're just turning, not really using any braking or throttle input. But when you're going through some of the corners, for example like this corner, you want to try to make sure that the dot isn't all the way to one side and you're still trying to slow down or accelerate, as that's going to increase the tire wear from all the tire scrubbing. Another way to tire save is to not slide around, as that's going to heat up the tires even more and cause even more tire wear. Another way is to smoothly apply your inputs, especially as you exit some of the corners. You can also exit some turns at higher gears, which will prevent any wheel spin from happening, which will save a bit of the tire life on your back wheels. And one last thing is that you can also adjust the brake balance. That way you can try to even out the tire wear. So if your front tires are experiencing more tire wear, you can bring the brake balance to the back of the car. That way the back tires get a bit more of the tire wear, but it relaxes the front tires a bit more. But that is pretty much it for this guide. Sorry if I'm sounding a little bit weird. That's just because it's pretty late at night and I'm trying to stay a little bit quiet. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. So this is Mr. MCA trying to really practice for this race, and I'll see you in the next video.